My name is Savannah Yates. I'm a doctoral of occupational therapy student here today to present my capstone poster. So there's a lot of information and we're going to dive into it a little deeper in the next couple slides. So the first thing is my literature review. My literature review focused on the impact of sitting volleyball on health-related quality of life for individuals with physical disabilities. So we know that individuals with physical disabilities have limited opportunities to participate in sports and leisure as compared to their able-bodied peers. This also puts them at risk for health complications and sedentary behavior. So the goal of adapted sports is to reduce this gap. We know that many adapted sports already have impacts on health-related quality of life and quality of life in general. But the literature investigating sitting volleyball is significantly lower compared to the overall adapted sport literature. So my goal of this literature review was to really dive into this and see what those impacts are of sitting volleyball specifically. So the databases I used were PsycInfo, Sport Discuss, SynHall, and PubMed and ERIC. And we followed Prisma guidelines for this review. We had 2 reviewers initially for the first round of searching and screening. Then, upon a second review, when we expanded our criteria, we only had 1 reviewer. In total, we ended up with 15 articles, and we found that there are 3 major themes and 3 major impacts. That is on life satisfaction, independence, and physical health, all within the overall category of health-related quality of life. And this is very important because it shows that sitting volleyball is an adapted sport in of itself that is resulting in these impacts. And this also is very important because it's not just that the sport is doing these things, but also it targets a new population. The target population for sitting volleyball is usually amputees, and this is one that not as many adapted sports are available for. So it is really cool to see that sitting volleyball gives an opportunity for this new population and for people with different interests, and also shows these improvements in quality of life. So what are the key ingredients? It is sitting volleyball, so it is on the ground or in a chair. This means that the net must be lowered so that people can still reach over it and play the game effectively. It is a team-based sport. That means it relies on other members of the team to have success. And this improves their communication and creates a built-in support network for socialization for participants. As a coach, it's important to facilitate a culture of competition and give that consistent feedback. This improves participants' desire to complete and accomplish goals outside of the sport and improves their self-esteem and self-efficacy to go after those goals. Like I said, it is a physical activity sport. They are moving around and they are improving their physical health and fitness through this sport as well. So for my case study, I went through a facility case. This was analysis of the site, and originally it was supposed to be a provider case, but we changed due to a limited interest initially when I got there. So instead, I did stakeholder interviews and assessments, administrative policy review, and practice pattern observation. So the stakeholders that I interviewed were the section supervisor for therapeutic recreation, 2 therapeutic recreation specialists, and a Paralympic sitting volleyball player who is retired. The assessments that I provided them, as well as interviews, were the acceptability of intervention measure, the AIM, the intervention appropriateness measure, the IAM, and the feasibility of intervention measure. This is the FIM. So the policies that I reviewed were related to athlete expectations, team requirements, funding, and travel. And I shadowed and observed other adapted sports, as shown on the screen, to really inform future implementation of sitting volleyball. So what did we find for this? We found that there were 3 major implementation barriers, which were appropriateness, feasibility, and sustainability. Within appropriateness, the biggest barriers were the lack of target population interest, like I said, that's amputees, and lack of equipment to fit this intervention to other populations. Within feasibility, it was mostly limited space due to competing programs and a high cost associated with general sitting volleyball equipment. And sustainability, there were barriers to qualified staff implementing it and limited nearby competitive programs. So, in order to support future implementation, I came up with strategies to address each of these barriers. Within appropriateness, one of the biggest things is targeted recruitment strategies. We have an amputee soccer team in Columbus. We also have an amputation clinic at Nationwide. There are other communities that we can tap into and really get the word out. So if they're interested, they're able to participate. And then another way is to invest in low-cost equipment to improve the adaptability of the program. That's a good place to start. So for our blind athletes, you can use a ball that has bells in it. That's relatively cost effective. Within feasibility, the biggest barrier was the lack of space for implementation. So if we were to actually utilize Franklin Park Adventure Center, this is the place that we normally host our adapted sport programming, but it was closed due to renovations during my Capstone experience. So opening this back up provides a good place to play the sport, as well as it is a place that's familiar to our participants. And another way to kind of work around that space requirement is to host a triad event to gain initial interest. This allows for recruitment, and it's easier to start with these smaller events than to try to find space consistently for 8 weeks. And another way to support that high cost is to pursue outside funding. So CRPD has a lot of sponsorships, and if we can try to tap into those to support the program, that would be very important for cost. Within sustainability, like I said, there's just not as many staff currently that are trained in sitting volleyball. So that is the biggest way to support sustainability in the future, is to provide that training. So this can be in-house training services, as well as creating staff training booklets for the future. And in order to compete, in order to address the other barrier for sustainability, is working with nearby programs to try and reduce that distance and reduce the barrier of transportation and travel associated with competition, as well as host open competitions to the public so that maybe we're not having to go all the way to another club and we're just competing against other participants in the community. What else did I do while I was on my Capstone experience? The one thing I want to talk about here is Legislative Advocacy Day. So as a community organization, a public organization, CRPD really needs to advocate for the needs of its participants. And one of my objectives was to address a barrier to adapted sport participation and partner with a community resource. So I partnered with the Columbus Advisory Committee on Disability Issues, CACD, and I went to a Legislative Advocacy Day in order to talk about what these barriers to transportation are and start to address these so that our participants are able to come to our programming, because that is always the first step. Another thing was I participated in aquatics. So the TR, Therapeutic Recreation section, has both an adapted swim team and adapted swim lessons. I was lucky enough to lead both. And they also have an adaptive aquatic fitness class for their adult population. And I was able to lead this programming as well. This was really cool to see how aquatics is beneficial across the lifespan. And I also adapted American Red Cross lesson plans with my mentor, Ray Nutter, for future instructors to know how and when to adapt these lessons and really fit the population that we have. And I was also able to lead an in-service training for our current staff on how to utilize aquatic school tools during lessons and adapt skills to different populations. I also participated in hockey. Columbus has so many different adapted hockey teams. CRPD collaborates with the Columbus Ice Hockey Club to run adapted hockey programs, including blind and special hockey, and there's a sled hockey program through the Columbus Blue Jackets. In order to highlight all three of these programs, the Blue Jackets hosted Hockey is for Everyone night, and each team was recognized on ice. So the special hockey team and the sled hockey team got to play during intermissions. And as you can see here, I am in the corner supporting the special hockey programming during intermission, which was really awesome to be on the ice. I also helped out with our blind hockey team throughout my entire experience, and I was lucky enough to participate in a joint practice with the Columbus Icebreakers, their blind hockey team. And it was really cool to see all of our athletes just start to work together like they were on the same team, even though they've never played together. And personally, I loved participating in the hockey or helping out with the hockey team because I got to also learn how to adapt hockey for visually impaired individuals and how to lead visually impaired individuals, as well as how to gain the skills of a hockey coach and adapted hockey coach. And I learned how to skate backwards, which I was very proud of. So, my last big thing that I really got to help out with was Girls Empowerment. This is a program that is run every single year at Columbus Rec and Parks, where young girls are taught to become leaders, navigate feminine issues, and practice self appreciation and self love. At the end of each year, there's an event where they continue to learn these skills, and they're specifically related to one sport, one outdoor activity, and one art based activity, and they participate in a service project together. So this year, they learned how to play volleyball, which was a perfect opportunity to provide inclusive education that was related to my capstone area. So while the girls were learning their standing volleyball skills and participating in a game that way, we also participated in sitting volleyball and learned those skills as well. And it was really awesome to see the girls be very inclusive and talk about how they can include other people when they play in a seated position. While I was on site, I got to develop many other resources. As you can see on the screen, this is my training pathway for adapted swim. This shows what different training opportunities are necessary for each level. So volunteer, part-time, full-time staff member, what training do they need to be able to successfully implement a program? I was able to do this for adapted swim and sitting volleyball. I also created a large binder of resources related to sitting volleyball, which included background information on the sport, lesson plans, how to receive different training in sitting volleyball, and an 8-week exercise training plan, which was very fun to create. This is my references. I also just really wanted to show some acknowledgement of all the different people that have supported me throughout this project. Dr. Erica Kemp, Ray Nutter, Dr. Bailey Peters, all my colleagues at Columbus Rec and Parks, and all of my lovely professors have done so much for the growth of me as a student, and I would not be here without you all. I also wanted to thank my family and my friends for supporting me throughout this experience. I cannot thank you enough. And lastly, I wanted to acknowledge Grammarly, which I used for grammar assistance and editing throughout this paper and presentation. Thank you. I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you for listening.